Good morning. Most of you guys know me. My name is Mike Harrigan. I oversee the operations for the campus here and advocacy. And this morning our training is just understanding the why and kind of the how of procedures here at the shelter. One of the things that we get a lot is when somebody calls down here or talks to one of the staff, they really always say, well, hey, how come this person can't stay here, and why are they in this situation? And it's almost like we have this secret mystery that we know down here that you guys don't understand, you know. You know, what I was thinking about driving here this morning was, how many of you as employees here have encountered somebody asking you, what is the deal here about how can I stay here, or you know, what, yeah, and people are always asking kind of the hows and whys, and it's not, when we do it every day, it's part of shelter staff's, you know, it's part of what we do, but for other staff that don't work directly in the shelter, it's a complex process. How we obtain information, how we refer other people to other shelters, what the criteria is for staying here, and then kind of how we approach it and how we go about doing that. So that's what we wanted to give everybody an overview. So this training will be for people who are working directly in the shelter, but it should be interesting enough for those of you who are trying to find the balance between the two. That I'll give you Tom this morning, and we'll go ahead and start.
Let's start with a word of prayer. Quickly, let's go through your name and which ministry you're working in, okay? I mainly want to know the ministry you're working in, because if I don't know your name now, I won't know it after you introduce yourself. But your name and the ministry you're in. Some of you have heard, I'll come back. I'll do two things right now. Our 5-star basic ministry excellence operation, the 5 L's. Now, how many of you heard of that? All right, more. That's good, because that's really how we want a philosophy of ministry to go. The other thing I'll be doing is Bell, and I'll try and get through that quick, because that's dull for a lot of people, right? But not this. 5-star standards of excellence. You have a little card, and it has them out there, so you can refer to that if you can read the small print. Got good glasses. I'm going to start with listening, because the other 4, which are listening, learning, leading, lifting, are in many ways how we fulfill the love. So we're going to start with listening. Here's what it says, right? We will demonstrate our belief in the value of those we serve by intentionally seeking out their feedback and truly hearing their suggestions. We will make listening to the needs and concerns of those we serve a priority in our day-to-day ministry activities. This is a demonstration of belief. What do we do here? Broadly speaking, we're customer service, right? We clothe, we house, we feed, we help the needs of people. But it's not just a customer service job. If you were here yesterday listening to Mike, State of the Mission, hopefully you got that real good. This is a ministry, so it goes beyond that. So we have a very basic belief system that we have to live out. Demonstrates our belief in the value of those we serve. There's inherent value because of who they are in God's sight. We are doing daily ministry activities. We want to emphasize that ministry part. Looking for feedback from them and what their needs and concerns are, but we have to intentionally seek it and truly hear and make listening a priority. Most of you are pretty busy, doing all kinds of stuff. And sometimes people come and interrupt what we're doing, right? Is that a good or bad thing? It depends. However, it's a ministry, okay? And so even when it's an interruption, it's one of those God times, and we really have to take time to value that person, and one of the most valuable ways we do that, of valuing, is to listen to them. Take that time from what we're doing to minister. I throw this in because I like the idea, this is the listening process, okay? Somebody starts to speak, right? And you may not hear everything that's said. You might be doing something else, you might be reading a paper, you might be talking to somebody, whatever, okay? You know this if you have a spouse, okay? You might not always get it right away. Then you choose to concentrate. And if they say anything you don't like, particularly critical of you, you start to react emotionally. You with me so far? Yeah. Then you start planning what you're going to say before they're finished. And then you think you've heard them when they've stopped talking. You see where that doesn't hold? All along there. So, by the way, on the other side, you have to get people's attention before you start in on your message. Right? That's the other side of it. Listening process is something we work at. Okay? So, why is listening important? Come on.
Well, I think what I found is people, I guess there's a difference from, it's people want to feel like they're heard, right?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily what they're saying, but that you're paying attention to them, that you care, right? That's the way I see what listening is. Because a lot of times I have to say no, but a lot of times I can do that in a way where a person can accept it because I think they felt heard. That's kind of what we try to practice here. That's kind of the way I see it.
I understand what you're saying. I understand your need, your perspective. There's only so much I can do about that right now. But I'm on your side. Yeah. That's the message. In communication, there's always messages beyond what the words are. I hope you understand that one. Okay? Just how we are reacting, how we're listening, how we are talking, how is a message in itself, not just the words we say. And we want that message to be, we're caring for you. We value you. We're taking time to listen and understand you, whatever else we can do. More. Why is listening important?
Sometimes people don't exactly tell you they need help. So when you listen, you can detect a lot of areas that they need help in. Also, most of the clients that we deal with that come through here, they're used to being criticized and saying that they can't do something, or or not given the opportunity to speak and have someone just totally listen to them.
Sure.
So it also sets in comfortability that allows them to open up more with you as well.
Absolutely.
Keep it simple. It's best to understand to be understood instead of being understood.
That is a prayer from St. Francis, one of the sections there. Better to try to understand than to be understood. To it now. I will get back to you as soon as I can, but I hear you got the problem. I just don't have the time right now, but I'll come back. Now, some people don't like that, obviously, but at least you're acknowledging them and what their need is right now. I have heard that. I just can't do anything about it because the other two things I have to do.
Or maybe wording it is it's too important for me to talk about right now, and I don't have the time to give it my full attention.
Absolutely. Good point. Learning, not assuming, comes through listening. Even Jesus asked questions. We can assume a lot. We have to check it out. It shows respect. It builds common ground. It can solve short-term problems by letting people know they're heard even if the problem can't be solved in the way they desire. We basically said that in different ways. It can point to long-term solutions if we learn from our listening. And true listening is an act of caring and love, of Christian humility and service. So what makes listening difficult at your area of ministry? Do you want to bring up any examples?
There you go, Ray.
Yeah.
You can be meeting with someone, and another individual comes to the window in crisis, and you tell them, like, give me 5 minutes, and they get upset.
What would you do about that?
They gotta wait.
Okay.
I mean, I don't say it in a harmful way, but they just have to wait, because I'm meeting with somebody that I'm trying to listen to at this particular time.
Sometimes, and only sometimes, if we have more than one staff there or volunteer, sometimes that person can be dealt with by someone else, or at least attended to while you're doing what you're needing to do. If you're by yourself and they don't like it, there's just nothing we can do.
Some individuals, they seek out specific people
Yeah.
that are working. So they don't wanna talk to anyone else, they just wanna talk to you.
And I'm just really sorry about that. That's the way it is.
I can speak for the accounting department. Sometimes in order to solve a problem or reconcile something that you need to do, it requires a great deal of focus. And if interrupted, you have to start that whole process over again. So that's a challenge.
Again, it's clear communication as to why
Right.
this interruption just can't happen right now. I will get back to you later.
But at that, the challenge is at that
Even
point, it's
that.
already done. Yeah. You know,
Where's
it
the
depending on how
secretary and the
depending on
person
how
who
deep
keeps
you
quiet?
are in the
Yeah.
weeds. You know.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's life.
Yeah, it just is. But you asked for a challenge. So.
That's a challenge. All right. You have a list of open-ended questions. That was one of your handouts. That's just some suggestions to get people talking so you can listen to them better. We've had a group every once in a while called motivational interviewing, which is really helpful. Okay. And I think the biggest heart of that is the open-ended question idea, so that you can get information that you need from people by drawing them out, and then you listen carefully and have a dialogue, as it were, through questions and answers, particularly when you don't know someone very well at the beginning. When you have a relationship, it gets a little different. But still, the idea of open-ended questions is a real helpful one. Anybody make a comment on that? I'll let you read through them, okay? So, listen. Now we go into learn.
Right. Roll three. Let's go. Horse, you got 100 pounds on Collis and you can't keep him out of our backfield? Hold your block until the whistle blows. Hold it. All right, let's go.
What's with the camera? Michael always does better when he sees what he's supposed to be doing.
Holding. Left tackle.
Michael, come on.
Or, come here, son. You're gonna hold him. Hold him inside here between the tits. You got it? Will you look at me, son? If you grab him outside here like this, or that horse collar thing you just did, You're gonna get flagged and I'm gonna be pissed. You hear me? All right, let's go.
Baby, wash my stuff, all right?
Okay.
Well, at least they look good coming off the bus. They'll be terrified till they realize he's a marshmallow. Looks like Tarzan plays like Jane.
Give me a minute, Bert.
We're in the middle of practice, Leanne.
You can thank me later. Come. Michael, do you remember when we first met and we went to that horrible part of town to buy you those dreadful clothes? And I was a little bit scared and you told me not to worry about it because you had my back. Do you remember that?
Yes, ma'am.
And if anyone tried to get to me, you would have stopped them, right? And when you and SJ were in that car wreck, what did you do to the airbag?
Stopped it.
You stopped it. You stopped it. This team is your family, Michael. You have to protect them from those guys, okay? Listen. Okay. Tony here's your quarterback, all right? You protect his blind side. When you look at him, you think of me, how you have my back, how you have his, okay? All right, Tony, go back. All right. Oompa Loompa here is your tailback. When you look at him, you think of SJ and how you'd never let anyone or anything hurt him. You understand me? All right. Go back. Got it?
What about Collins and Mr. Tui?
Fine. They can be on the team, too. Are you going to protect the family, Michael?
Yes, ma'am.
Good boy. Then go have some fun. Yelling at him doesn't work, Bert. Doesn't trust men. In his experience, they pretend to care about you till they disappear.
Wanna run a play?
SJ, you're gonna want to get this.
Okay. Come on, Michael.
All right, Michael, come on. Woo! Yes! Michael!
All right, way to go, O. Way to go.
That boy.
Okay. What'd you say to him?
You should get to know your players, Bert. He tested 98% in protective instincts. I said you could thank me later. It's later, Bert.
What did you learn from that?
Don't yell at me.
Doesn't always work, huh? What else?
Get to know the person first.
Amen. Get to know the person. Here is the learning one. We will seek to gain a better understanding of those we serve and allow this information to change our perspectives. We will continually integrate our new understanding and knowledge of effective ministry into the 5-star standards of excellence. Again, we will seek to gain, intentional, a better understanding. We always want to get better, right? Of those we serve. It's a ministry. And we allow this information to change our perspectives, and then we integrate it into our ministry. Want to read this with me? Then Jesus said, "Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear." That actually means doing what you've heard. So what are we trying to learn from people?
The best way we can serve them.
How to better serve them. Okay.
How to treat them.
All right?
What their needs are.
What their needs are. Okay? Well, again, we can make assumptions. Need to challenge that.
And how they communicate those needs, because like James was saying, people will come in here and they'll tell you what they think they need, but you gotta listen really hard or pay attention to what it is that they really need, because a lot of times, people, especially broken people, don't know what they need. Or they've been told their whole life they need something that maybe they really don't. So it takes a different kind of paying attention.
It's a generality from counseling that the person who comes in doesn't usually present the actual need right at the beginning. It's usually something else, and then you get to what their real need is, even when they know it. Sometimes they don't.
And I think when we were talking yesterday about transition and about the wraparound, that's kind of what we were getting at, is that in your job, you may experience somebody coming for you for a specific need, like clothing or food, or we may be for shelter, but there may be a whole different thing going on there. And the more we integrate, the more we're able to serve the whole person, and not just the one immediate need in the crisis, but get beyond the crisis to really help that person. And that's kind of where these trainings, and this is what the whole thing has been developed about.
So how do we go about learning from those we serve?
Practice.
Okay.
Every day, or every time somebody comes to the window, it's gotta be a different situation pretty much. I mean, there are similar ones, but like you said, you know, these people come off the street and you have no idea who they are or what's about them, so you have to listen first, obviously, and try to defuse the situation at hand. And then you can get to know them better and then try to find out their real needs. Because when they first come in, they probably just want maybe food or shelter, you know? But that's not what they really need. You know, they might need treatment, they might need whatever.
Once again, we want to make sure that we're not assuming we understand and know them.
Right. Listen.
What's a change in perspective look like?
For me, it's a willingness to admit, I was wrong. This person was speaking about this thing, but actually, that's not what they meant. If I stay with my pride and I don't admit that I got it wrong, I'm going to be stuck constantly assuming that that's the way it always is.
We don't do that. Not too many of us, right? We know we're right, well, except when we're wrong. What are my barriers to learning?
Pride.
Pride?
Assumption.
Assumptions? I've had such great experience. I'm so experienced with these people, so I can tell immediately when they come in what's going on with them. No. You have to check and see. Maybe, maybe not. Then you can't just tell them either. That's another thing, right? They have to be able to solve their problem. We don't solve it for them, even if we're right. We're not always right.
Stereotype.
Okay. Prejudice of various kinds. Stereotyping.
Insecurity.
Yep. Here's a few things you want to look for, trends. If more than one person says the same thing, it might be true. About your ministry, about whatever. Service issues. What's working, what's not. Unmet needs. When I first started working here, we had very, very little resource navigation. It was a huge unmet need, which we're doing, 3,000 times better than when I first started working here. Our need for more training or help ourselves is a learning. Expectations and miscommunications. And what's most effective and not just what's most efficient. Do you know the difference between those things? Tell me the difference.
I don't know the difference. I'll
Okay.
tell you. Most efficient, uses the least resource, uses the least amount of energy, is fast. You don't do that with human communications. What's most effective is what's penetrating, what takes time, what has depth, and what has nuance.
So that's good. I like that. How do we measure that here?
Well, efficiency is based on process,
Right.
and effectiveness is based on outcome. So you can measure the outcome.
So how do you guys do that? Like, do you guys measure your outcome? Sometimes I feel like there's, because we serve different parts of the body here, sometimes I feel like some of you have the kind of jobs where your outcome is measured in smiles, and mine is like in death threats. You know what I mean? You know, I talked to Michelle, and she's handing out coats, and everybody loves her, and I come in and they're like, oh, I gotta go see Mike Hare again, right? Even though we're both ministering, right? That was my kind of observation.
Now, it's great when efficient and effective can work together, but it doesn't always do that.
I mean, with people though, you can't really, you have no idea how effective you're really being, because you don't know what thing you say or do will affect them, you know, a month from now, a year from now. So you don't always get the benefit of having that data or that knowledge.
Which is why I think that this is one of our 5 standards. It's learning from, okay? We might blow it with an individual, but we need to learn from it so that we do better along the way. You're absolutely right. So we move to lead. We will continuously improve our ministries based upon the information we gain from those we serve and other sources. We will drive change by modeling the behaviors we wish to see in our ministries and encouraging others to do likewise. We'll hold ourselves and others accountable for those behaviors and changes that we want to have. Continuous improvement, modeling the desires behavior, and consistent accountability. Leadership. John Maxwell, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. You can't manage men into battle, you manage things, you lead people. An admiral. And Harry Truman, president, my definition of a leader is a man who can persuade people to do what they don't want to do, or do what they're too lazy to do, and like it. Now there's a leader. Do you see yourself more as a leader or a follower? This is the second sheet you have. So I'd like you to take that and think about that. Okay? Do you see yourself more as a leader or a follower? What's one thing you'd like about being a leader and one thing you dislike? And what are some barriers to leading? Why are these questions important?
It allows you the opportunity to, you know, to look at yourself and do some self-inventory.
Okay. Somebody else?
We are moving with purpose and with direction. And these are questions that force us to help us consider what direction that is.
See your strengths and your weaknesses.
We do have both.
And I think we're called to do and be both, right? We're followers of Christ, and then we're called to lead others into followers, right?
I think so. I think that's what this 5-star point about leading is telling us. And I think the reality is a lot of us feel like followers and not leaders. So one of the things you got to think about is not title, not your job description, but what you are called to do by Christ. And there is a leadership role that we all have as Christians. And you have as a minister in this place. Will you step up to it? What are the things that seem to be a block to that? Your fears, not trained, I haven't done it before, etc., etc. Will I say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing? There's a number of those kinds of things. So take this and in prayer, think about it. Okay? Modeling. You are the salt of the earth, you are the light of the world. Let your light shine before others so that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Good definition of modeling. Why is modeling important?
Build up character.
For who? Them or us?
For them.
Both.
Both, okay.
Both.
You ever heard the phrase, do as I do, say, not as I do? Yeah, not modeling. Modeling is do as I do. That's a little intimidating, isn't it? But you are the salt, you are the light. Let's go to lift. We will encourage and equip those we serve to become leaders, here, at home, at work, and in the community. We will be motivated by our desire to produce disciples that in turn lead others to Jesus and produce disciples themselves. I wish you could understand how deep is my anxiety for you, and for those at Laodicea, and for all those who've never met me, Paul writes. How I long that you may be encouraged, and find out more and more how strong are the bonds of Christian love. How I long for you to grow more certain in your knowledge, and more sure in your grasp of God Himself. May your spiritual experience become richer as you see more and more fully God's great secret, Christ Himself. For it is in Him and in Him alone that men and women will find all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. There's the encouragement we want, to focus people on Christ. So here's a few other questions, right? Who is the earthly person that's most impacted your life the most? What are some positive qualities of leaders that you admire? And what are some negative characteristics you've seen in some leaders? We're talking about modeling as much as anything. Lifting people. So, who's impacted your life the most?
My mother.
Why?
I don't know why.
Okay. Love?
Protection.
Protection? Okay. Anybody else want to share? Yeah.
I would say my mother.
Let's hear it from moms.
Her overall humbleness and graciousness that she displayed. I've watched her take abuse verbally from individuals and still, accept them with open arms, clothe them, feed them. And at a time when I was young, I couldn't understand that, but now I understand it.
Yeah. Powerful impact of modeling. Of example.
I think the thing that I picked up on that clip, that interesting thing was when she went back and she said, she said to to the coach, all the men in his life had disappeared and let him down. So that like modeling has a reverse effect too. And sometimes I think, sometimes people we serve react to us in a way that can be negative, but it's not us, it's maybe what we represent, or we're modeling to them, and we haven't picked up on that. I see that here a lot, is people become angry or defensive, and it's not because of us, and it's learning not to take that personally, you know, to separate that it's not me, that this person may have had a bad model in the past. And I think that's why modeling and being consistent is so important, because we have to continuously say, no, you know, not everybody's like this. Not everybody's going to leave you. Not everybody's going to desert you.
How many know what Q-tip stands for? Some FLC people might, some men's people might. What is it?
Quit taking it personally.
Quit taking it personally. Because most of the time, you know, you are in a position of authority in one way or another, and so they can come up to you mad because of what they're expecting from you. All right? Or not expecting, but their expectations are at a certain point from the experiences they've had. So we need to make sure we don't take it personal. Quit taking it personal. What are some positive qualities of leaders that you admire? Throw them out.
Patience.
Patience.
Encouraging.
Encouragement.
Decisive.
Decisive.
Consistent.
Consistent.
Offer hope.
Hopeful. Yeah, negative is not good all the time, is it?
Approachable.
Approachable.
Patient.
Let's go to negative, some negative characteristics. You don't like.
Dismissive.
Okay?
No.
Arrogant.
Hypocrisy.
Hypocrisy.
Unapproachable.
Can't ever get to them. And when you do, they only want to talk about themselves. They don't want to listen to you. Servant leadership. Let me go through this quick. It's a philosophy or style of leadership that is not one of the three more traditional styles. The autocratic, do as I say, democratic, do as I do, or the laissez-faire, do as you choose. Servant leadership is a different style of leadership, not new, but not much used. Key difference is that the leader serves the needs of the followers rather than being served. There's a traditional style where leaders at the top, followers at the bottom, making the leader look good. Servant leadership is the other way around. Jesus called them together and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and give his life as a ransom for many." Consummate act of leadership, servant leadership, was washing the feet of the apostles. After the meal, he took off his outer clothing, wrapped a towel around his waist, poured water in a basin, and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel. And when he finished, he asked them, "Do you understand what I've done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. But now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I've set you an example that you should do as I have done for you." So, just to go into the symbolism real quick, sandals. Everybody's wearing sandals in a dusty, dry area. Your feet will not only get dirty, they'll get caked with mud and sweat and all that kind of stuff. You need to wash your feet. But it was the task of either you or a servant or a slave to do that. So here's Jesus, who assumed the role, and the disciples were probably stunned with that act of humility. That's not what a leader does. But Jesus' motivation was love, voluntarily becoming their servant, and setting an example for servant leadership. You might recall they were talking about who's going to be the best leader once Jesus is gone. He said, this can't go on that way. How can you be that kind of servant leader? Because you can risk serving others because you trust in God that He's in control of your life. That's how come we can really do any risk. Amen? All right? So Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under His power. He was secure in who He was, not insecure. That He'd come from God and was returning to God. The purpose was there. So He got up from the meal, took off His outer clothing, wrapped a towel around His waist, washed their feet. That's a secure leader who can become a servant of his followers to build them up. Your greatest test of leadership may be to wash the feet of those you know will soon betray you. Think about that one. Do we have people here who were uncertain how they're going to react? Whether they will appreciate what you do? Yeah. We're called to serve, to be servant leaders. If you're not wearing a servant's towel, kneeling at the feet of others, you're in the wrong place. How about that one? It does take a bit of work, doesn't it? So we lead by example, like Jesus did. Delegate responsibility and authority. Can't do it all ourselves. Do you remember an example from the Bible where Jesus does that? Anybody? Yeah.
There's one where He sent out disciples 2 at a time.
That's right. You gotta start trying it yourself. In fact, the whole business was that. He takes this fishermen, farmers, tax collectors, turns them into evangelists, lets them go. Peter, the fisherman who became the rock, Saul, the persecutor who became the great evangelist. We help people with life issues like Jesus did with us. Listen, show compassion, concern for the total well-being of the individual, not just the one thing that we can immediately do. Again, examples. One of the great ones, Samaritan woman at the well. She actually he asked her to help him. And then they got into a big discussion and led her to eternal life. You've undoubtedly got this before, the disciple-making process. Is that the last one I gave you, maybe? I think so. So, you watch me while I do it, then we do it together, then I watch you while you do it, and then others watch you while you encourage others. That's the classic disciple-making process, which was exactly what Jesus did. That's what we're called to do as servant leaders.
I think one of the things that we experience here probably more than anywhere else, because we're in community, is that there is always somebody watching what you do here.
Amen.
And when you especially when you come work at the mission, and then you go out into the community at large, you take the mission when you go. I mean, I don't know how many times in the years that I've been here now that's an issue. That we get a call because somebody has acted a certain way for good things, for really positive things, or for negative things. They're like, isn't that person with you? Doesn't that person belong to you? Sometimes we've been in the news media because somebody had an association with us that didn't even live here, but it's a strong association. And one of the reasons is because we are a ministry. So people are really paying attention to what we do. So when you're on campus, remember, people are really watching you. And they come up all the time. I mean, I can't tell you how many different days we have conversations in the office about this is what's been said, this is what this person did, and then they circle back and we have to say, hey, was this part of your ministry, or because it's hard to separate that because it's, you know, we're called to a deeper level. You know, I always think about that. Remember that commercial? It's not just a job, it's an adventure. What was that? Was that the Army?
Yeah.
But I always think about that with the mission when people were interviewing people. It's like, hey, this isn't just a job. It's more than that. You know, it's you become part of a culture here. Does everybody kind of follow along with that? Can you relate to that experience, Miguel?
Absolutely. The mission has no walls. There's no walls. There's no compartmentalization of my tasks and processes which isolate me from somebody's eyes. I totally get that.
That's because you're going to 3 of them. Here's how Maxwell put it. The leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. In my experience, followers always ask leaders 3 questions. Do you care for me? Number 1. Can you help me? Number 2. And 3. Can I trust you? Now, we do all of that together. Listen. What's the next one? Learn. Then lead. And then lift. And that kind of does put together a very practical way of loving. We will be guided by our desire to love others self-sacrificially, extending the compassion of Christ by sharing their burdens. We will be motivated by our belief that all people bear the image of God and therefore should be loved unconditionally. We will carry out all our ministry activities in a manner that reflects our belief that we are actually serving Jesus himself. We'll be guided by our desire to love others. You probably won't be here, aren't here, if you don't believe that. Okay? And you won't stay here if you don't believe that. Self-sacrificially. I know there's a few of us that could probably earn more money elsewhere. But for here, now we're called to be here. And it's not so much sometimes a huge sacrifice. We get more than we sacrifice. But we do sacrifice. Extending the compassion of Christ. Compassion. Feel with the other people. By sharing their burdens, not carrying them ourselves. We can't do and care more about their situation than they do, but we share, we come alongside. We will be motivated by our belief that all people bear the image of God. What does that mean? We're getting theological here.
Well, it reminds me of a meme, you know, we all bleed red. We were formed in his image, we're creative, we're expressive, we're emotive, we have potential for compassion and for expression. Nobody in this room has more of that than any other person. You know, we're cut from that one mold, that one spiritual original mold.
Sometimes it's said that there's this God-shaped hole in us because we are made in the image of God to relate to God. God can relate to us. Love is the essence of it. And unfortunately, we're born with a very distorted, damaged part of us, that part of the image, but it's not totally gone. There is still that which responds to God when God comes to us, or at least tries to. It's a struggle, it's a battle at that point. But we're all in the image of God, and therefore we're all valuable. God so loved the world that he gave. Why? Because it was so important to him. And therefore we should be loved unconditionally. We should love others unconditionally. In all our ministries, we do them in a manner that reflects our belief that we're actually serving Jesus himself. The righteous answered him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick and in prison and go and visit you? And the king will reply, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. And in Ephesians, serve wholeheartedly, as if you were serving the Lord, not people. Because you know that the Lord will reward each one for whatever good they do, whether they are slave or free. Here is a prayer that was taken from a statement of Dyram Robert, who is a long time working here at the mission. Lord Jesus, as situations come our way in our service here at City Mission, help us to serve people with open doors to let them in, open hearts to love them as they are, open eyes to see their needs, open ears to hear their cry, and open hands to feed and serve them, body and soul, for your sake. Amen. It's a good prayer. Any comments, questions?
I have a comment, something that has helped me, and I try to remember. We were encouraged once in a training too, because every one of those said, those we serve. And I think to sit down and list out who do we serve, because I think it's obvious, our residents, our guests, our community, but it's each other. And that's helped me to think, wait,
Absolutely.
For me, it's volunteers. And for, like everybody has a little bit different people but each one of those, we serve each other on our team, and we should treat each other like that too. So that's just something that's helped me.
Excellent point. And I hope you all got that. There's many constituents who are a part of the mission, okay? Donors are one of them. We'd better serve them, You don't know who comes through the door and what they look like by how they're dressed, Some of you may know Jim Dean, all right? Anybody not know Jim Dean? Okay, quite a few. Because he's working at the men's desk. He's a volunteer. He's here twice a week. Yeah, you know that. Now you know. All right. Do you know that Jim is the president of the board of City Mission right now?
No. Wow.
That's surprises. All right. Any more? Then stand and stretch and take a brief break, okay? Thank you very much. One of the things I do is Bell Data. Check that through. I'm kind of the voice that helps get new reports and all those good things. And if you ever need to get there and you are locked out, I would be the first person to go to. Though Ryan can also do that. How many regularly use Bell Data? Okay. This is not going to be a how to use Bell Data, because a lot of you don't. But it's going to be an overview, and we'll see if we can do it pretty quick. So that's what it first looks like, right? The opening screen. It is our dedicated database for City Mission. If you use it, note that the password changes about every 3 months, like the Windows password. 3 tries and you're locked out. But Brian or I can reset it. There are programs there, and it covers nearly all of what we do. Men's, women's, Schenectady Works, transitional housing, dining center statistics, outreach program statistics. All of that can go into Bell. Here would be one of the first screens, and it's where you start with the client search. You put in 2 or 3 of the letters of the first last name, you come up with somebody, or you can use a social security number. Then there is also incidents and violations in the last 24 hours and case notes and clients' alarms in the last 24 hours. So it gives you a lot of information right at the very beginning. Also then shift notes. Who does shift notes at all? Okay, again, a few of you there. I don't think I'll go too much into that except to note that case notes go with a client and shift notes don't. They go through there, you can look them up, but after the first 24 hours you got to look them up someplace else and they can disappear. So if you want a note to go with the client, you have to put in case notes. That's the main difference. We can get reports of various kinds about active clients, new clients, exited clients. One of the things I do is check through all of the entrances and exits to make sure they're good. No problems that I can see. Demographics, non-financial services, everything else that we do. Batch entry, we can enter some statistics not just by the individual client, but you get a whole list and it goes a whole lot quicker that way. So there's that ability. Community meals was one of those things and all of that kind of stuff, so we get a lot of it into that. If we were then to do a client and enter them, here is some of the data that we can collect. Hopefully we do always collect. Basic demographics. Name, age, gender, race, ethnicity. Why they are here and their basic situation. Things like relationship status, veteran status. Primary reason homeless, and there's this whole list we can choose from. Abuse, domestic violence, employment issues, eviction, family breakup, fire, housing, identification, lack of, illness, incarceration, income, lack of job skills, being laid off, medical issues, mental problems, natural disasters, neglect, on and on and on. Why are they here? So we get some of that basic information. That begins a process of how can we best serve you. Number of times they've been homeless in the last 3 years. Highest level of education completed.
Can I stop for a second?
Yes.
Well, one of the things that we've been focusing on as a team and with the wraparound especially is this process. So intake and the questions that we ask people then become extremely vital to how people are, how we see them, how we interact, what our ministry is, how we kind of guide them through the process here. So what we've learned really, especially over the last year, is it's really vital sometimes the information that we have. Because what we found later on when we go back and we try to either, kind of measure what we're doing or look at how we interact with community partnerships, that information becomes extremely important in every single thing that we do. And it's very important to the individual because I know this from experience, the guys at the desk know this, the first impression that you make when a person walks in the door here can set the tone for their entire experience. So intake is it's a very vital thing. It's kind of the demographics and the information. It's not exciting, but it plays a huge and important role to almost everything we do. It's the start of a person's journey here at the mission.
I always tell people when they're doing an intake, there's 2 things you got to start with. Number 1, get their ID, because we need to know whether they have ID or not. But then you start a conversation about what's going on in your life. Why are you here? What are some of the things we can do? We'll need some of that information, but we're also just making a connection with the person. And the more connected we can make right at the beginning, the better the whole experience is. We're also then looking at what program they're going to be in, who their advocate is, whether they're going to be just here a short time, have a standard up to 30-day stay, get into our 90-day program or into the 9-month program. Get a cell phone number, an emergency contact person, if they'll let us, and then we have Empower Health medical questions. On 2 screens, we ask Empower Health, what do you need? Because we did do some medical, and so now we're putting in what they wanted, and we get that right at the beginning. Special needs such as alcohol or drug abuse, physical disability, chronic health condition, mental health issues, domestic violence experience. We ask about those. Income at entry, if any. Sustainability baseline questions. That's one of the newest things we've added to the intake. What best describes your relationship with God? You get 4 choices. Do you engage with a healthy community that reinforces your sobriety goals at least once a month? Church, Bible study, support group. What describes your sobriety? I've remained sober, I've had a one-time slip, I relapse in and out of sobriety, I'm not currently sober. Income situation. Employed full-time, part-time, pension, Social Security, no stable income. Which describes your housing? Do you own it, you make payments, etc.? Most of them are going to say, I'm homeless living in a shelter. But not everybody. There may be some temporary issues. And what describes your mental health now? Are you in crisis? Are you vulnerable? Are you secure? Are you safe? Are you thriving? And we have some definitions for those. But we get that. And one of the things we're going to do is then take those basic measures, which are measures that are talked about by our national mission group. What's that called now?
Citygate.
Citygate. There are some of those measures there, and we're going to ask them when they leave. If we can possibly get that information when they leave, easier for programmers than some of the people who don't stay very long, and compare the answers, and hopefully we've helped them. And we can have some measurement on that. Current ID, and an explanation of our guidelines and a signature that they agree with them. So at the exit, again, there's some exit screens, including that sustainability questions, those baseline ones, when they exit.
I was going to say, part of the measurement is that almost every agency, every government institution, every non-for-profit, they want what's called evidence-based data. They want now, anytime that you go to say, hey, this is our success in our program, they want to be able to see the logic and the actual evidence for what your statistics are showing. So we've started a whole process of really looking at the questions that we're asking, and then how do we actually measure it here. Now obviously as a Christian organization, our ultimate measurement is discipleship always. We put Jesus first. But there are other barriers sometimes. How have we helped take away the barriers to people's success? Or, you know, what they've done while they're here. Have they maintained employment? Did they get a job? Did they go into permanent housing? Questions like that. And then we're looking at trying to maintain contact and still measuring some of those variables as people are out in the community. So are you still in your apartment? Are you still employed? To see what we're doing is this working once the person leaves the mission? Because that gives us an idea of, hey, then when the person, because let's face it, sometimes people come back 2, 3, 10 times, depending on the individual. So sometimes you see the person and you want to go, okay, what we did the last time didn't work. What can we try differently? Or maybe the mission isn't the right environment for you. Because we're leaning again, as we talked about yesterday, as a place for transformation and change. And the way to be able to work on change is you got to be able to measure it somehow. It's not easy, but this is how we're going about doing it.
So that is a very quick overview of Bell. Okay? And do you have any questions? Yeah?
How do you determine what person gets what advocate? I mean, is it based on availability, or is it certain skills of the advocate, or all of the above? Can I-
Mostly availability, but Kermit, for instance, gets most of the people who are on parole. He has a specialty, if you will, with that. When you get into the program, a lot of the programmers who with Shook or myself, transitional is all Travis, and of course that's a little bit on the later side. But as much as anything, availability. We want to try and keep the caseloads not too overwhelming, you know, for individuals, except for Kermit. We throw everything at him otherwise. Good question. Anything else?
So part of what we're trying to do, we talked about wraparound yesterday, so part of what we're trying to do with intake, and this is what they're saying, is focus on the person versus the what. So up until now, and it was totally appropriate, but up until now we were measuring what we were doing. So if we start to measure what we're doing with the person and make it more about the person in a holistic way, then we're going to be looking at who's serving with the person. Is it the right person? Do we need to make a shift? And things like somebody comes in, we know they're going to be long-term. We want to let Matt in Workforce Development know now that in 6 months, he's going to have this guy. So now he's keeping a better eye on him, or a different eye on him than he would if this guy was a guest and wouldn't be continuing for a long term. And that's where the wraparound team comes in, and all of us as an extension to that team. Does that make sense?
The first thing that I'm going to talk about is Code Blue. You're going to get 3 handouts. We're just going to focus on the Code Blue, a guide to a conversation. The other 2 handouts are what the mission does and then what the Code Blue policy is for the county. This is a question that I get frequently, that we as a mission get frequently. It's publicly, it's a huge part of the wintertime process. I don't know if you guys have noticed that, but when the temperature dips, we have a tendency to get the news media down here. It's the stories are it's freezing cold. There's some reporter standing in front of the mission, and because you know it's we live in the Northeast, and it seems like we're in winter 7, 8, 9 months out of the year. But I think it's important. One of the major reasons why I want to talk about Code Blue is that if you ask people in the community, they associate the city mission. Our biggest association is we are a homeless shelter. That is the first thing that they go to. We may do a tremendous amount of other things in the community, but if you talk about the mission and you say somebody's homeless, we're the association. The mission has been here more than 100 years. We're here serving the homeless, the police, the other agencies, the county. So one of the sheets that I gave you is what the county printed out, and we are listed as the primary Code Blue shelter in Schenectady County. So does anyone have any idea how many people are in Schenectady County? Anybody guess? Yeah. There's more than 100,000 people in Schenectady County. Yeah. Does anybody know how many people we can keep here in one night? Mike?
We've been doing right around 12 a night for the last couple of weeks.
So that's on top of the regular amount of beds we have. So as a total, during the winter, between men and women, we could have, and children, we could have approximately 120 people, and we're serving a county that has over 100,000 people. So that gives you kind of an indication of what our capacity is, but our capacity sometimes kind of runs up with what the community expectation is. And this is something that you know, you can read about in the newspaper sometimes. You know, recently there was a little bit of controversy over the county sending people to Albany, and because we're part of that process, sometimes we can get drug into that, even though that we don't have that association, we're a private facility. So what I wanted to do was give you guys kind of a little rundown of what Code Blue is about, kind kind of a little scenario and maybe ask some questions here and give you guys an understanding of how this operates and also kind of what it is that we face as the shelter and how we deal with things. So does everybody have the Code Blue, A Guide to a Conversation? Anybody want to volunteer to read the example conversation? Anybody want to be the consumer and I'll be staff?
I'll be the consumer.
Okay. So this is the example conversation. I'm staff. And you notice whose name I used. Okay. Hi, this is June Roman, City Missions Men Desk. May I help you?
Yes, my brother is homeless and he can't stay here tonight. You have a bed, right?
Staff, we may be able to offer your brother assistance, but we cannot guarantee a bed. Our intake process starts at 4 p.m. We can assess your brother's situation, and if we cannot offer him a place here, then we can assist him with locating other shelter.
What do you mean? You do not have a bed? I called DSS and they send him there. He needs a place to go. He cannot stay here and it is freezing. You guys are the homeless shelter.
Exclamation.
The exclamation point. And we get that all the time. You guys are the homeless shelter, and social services consistently. So this is a phone call we probably get between 7 and 15 times a day. And I'm underestimating. If I said 25 times a day, I'd probably be in the ballpark. So add that up, that's 100 times a week we get this phone call. And so, yes, sir, we are a shelter. We do our best to accommodate as many people as we can, but we have limited capacity. The mission works with the county shelter system, and we will refer your brother to the emergency on-call system if we have no space. So this system becomes very complicated to explain to somebody that does not work in it. I think about half of the employees here don't understand the system either. They just don't. So if somebody comes up to you, and we'll get to that in a little bit, we are a voluntary participatory shelter in that system. So what we do is say to the county that we have this many beds for winter, for Code Blue, we've gone to the county and said we have 12 extra spaces at night. Because typically, because we offer programming here, we're full. So we're a full shelter. When a man comes in off the street or a woman comes in, we're typically full. There's no beds. So when a person's coming here for Code Blue, what are they normally getting, Kermit?
A man.
Right. And then there's a certain part of the population that are being told that they're being referred to the county. So it's freezing cold, it's 5 o'clock, it's winter time. How many people do you think really enjoy that process?
None.
None. What do you think their typical reaction is?
Flip out.
So a couple of the questions I asked was, so what do you see as some of those issues, right? So they'll be angry. So the problem sometimes with us is, well, that's what we get is that initial, well, you're the city mission. You're supposed to help me. You're supposed to help me. And then, go ahead, James.
This is a Christian organization.
There you go. Well, I got a little bit of that coming, right? Right? So, Kermit?
I think when a lot of gentlemen go to DSS, they have a letter with in bold saying go to the city mission. So basically what they're thinking is, okay, they sent us to the city mission, they have to stay here. And I have to explain to them it doesn't work like that. It doesn't go well all the time.
Right. So what we're stuck with is it's in between. How do we? So we started off saying, well, we're an organization that's dedicated to the love and service of God, and yet I have to tell a man in the freezing cold that I don't have space for him because we're limited. Right? You see how the conflict could be in that? Because you want to serve and help people, but you only have so many limitations. And that's part of ministry. And that's one of the things that we've been trying to reach out and teach staff
that what we try to do is to serve people in a way that we listen and we understand, but sometimes we have to say no to them, and how do we do that in love? So one of the things that staff can do is familiarize themselves with our Code Blue protocols, because you can have a major impact on a person's day, or possibly even their life, if you give them the wrong information during the wintertime. Or you can inadvertently cause some conflict by kind of misdirecting them, or kind of giving them the idea that, hey, you know what, I'm going to help you. You may have all the love in your heart and want to say, I'm going to help you tonight, and then they come back to you and they're like, those people, they just told me I can't stay here. Or they'll come to the window and they'll be like, well, Miguel said I could stay here, Nicole said I could stay here, Travis said I could stay here. Does that not happen, Mike? Right. And then so you have somebody not only who's struggling with where they're going to stay, and they're in that crisis moment, they're in the tyranny of the moment, but then you got to tell them no after some other employee said, oh, I can stay here. Right. And then they get very angry, they get defensive, and then, you know, then I want to go hide in the coat room and talk to Michelle.
And he does.
I do. Go in there, camera can't see me behind the thing.
Does the limit come from literal physical space?
Yes.
Or is it a code?
There's a couple of things with that. That's a very good question. So the limit comes with our availability for space, but there's also, we come under voluntary guidelines of the state, OTDA. So you have to have a certain amount of staff numbers with a certain amount of people. And during the wintertime, even when the 1 year we opened up the chapel, but we found it to be overwhelming. Because if we opened up the extra space, do you remember that movie where it was about the baseball field and the guy was like, if we build it, they'll come? Right, Field of Dreams, right. So if you open up the extra space, guess what? Those people showed up. And so we would have 30, 35 guys in here, and we found it unmanageable. So what we had to do was go back to the county and express to the county, hey, we have a limitation here, and this is the amount of people that we can take. Now, we did hire extra staff during that time, but as everybody knows, some of the things that you may not think about are during the week, between having the regular residents, which is about 75, and with the women over there, so you have about 115 people here every night, plus the additional Code Blue people. You know what you go through? You go through a lot of towels, you go through a lot of soap. Like I was here one Sunday, and me and Walter were in, and he was trying to show me how to do the laundry. That didn't go out too well. But it's because, you know what? I walked in, all the blankets were used, all the towels were used, because we're serving so many people. So that kind of gives you an idea. What we wanted to do was not to give you an idea of kind of how policy affects the everyday part, and also what Code Blue really is about, because Code Blue is a state law that says that a person, no matter what condition they're in, when the weather reaches under 32 degrees, that the county that they live in is responsible for housing them. So when we, as an agency, a lot of times we have to say to them, we're not, the other thing is, the assumption is somehow we're part of the county. We are a private organization, we're privately funded, we don't take county money, so they don't pay us for that bed. And for a lot of people, that's an understanding that's very difficult for them. And many times people come from other areas, so they really just expect this shelter to be a part of that city or county-wide system. And honestly, it's very difficult to explain to them right in the middle of that desk transaction that, hey, no, we're not part of the city, we're a private organization. That can become a real hard thing for a person. So we have tried to again, listen to people, see how we can adjust that process and serve them appropriately. So I wanted to get to, I can get to your, but I want to get to a couple of things to give you guys an idea of what we do. If we can't serve a person What we refer them to the county shelter on-call system. It's the county's responsibility at the end of the day to house the homeless person during the cold. If you have any questions about that, please call one of us or refer to that Code Blue protocol. And the second thing is, if somebody refuses service, because a lot of people will come and they'll say, I'm not going to Albany and I'm not staying in the county shelter. Because we run such a nice organization, many people want to stay here.
Yeah, they do, right?
They do. They don't want to stay anywhere else. And they'll tell you, well, you know what? I'm going to go sit outside in front of the pavilion in the cemetery, and they'll come back at 2 o'clock in the morning just so that they can stay here. That's love. You know why? The reality of the reason why they do that is because they experience the love of God here. They know that there's something safe. And it goes back, I think, to that follower leader thing. Jesus didn't need to promote himself. People followed him. And so people are attracted to what we have at the mission, and that's why they want to come and be here every night. Because they experience, they love, and they know they're safe here. That's a wonderful thing to be part of, but it's a heavy responsibility. So you guys understand kind of the conflict there with the protocols. I think the other thing with Code Blue is that, it's the they won't let me stay here tonight thing, I think, is the hardest obstacle to overcome, I think, for the average person that's not working in the men's shelter. I think for the average employee, that's the heartbreaking part. It's 4:30, I'm leaving, I'm going to my car, I got approached by a person on the street, it's tugging at my heart. What do I do? And why is that men's desk so mean? Why do they keep saying no to all these people? And so we wanted to give you an idea. It's about space, it's about limitation, it's about how many people we can serve, and it's about maintaining the protocol that we've agreed to with the community-wide partnerships that we have, which you'll find in those pages. Does anybody have any questions for me on that?
So Mike, what would be the best, this would help me, what would be the best thing to say to the person that says to me, they won't let me stay here?
Can I interrupt right there? So, two things, and the first one is a compliment to the men's, because over the last couple of years, it's been very minimal that we've heard this.
Yeah.
I mean, we still hear it, definitely, and you're going to hear it in community meal. That's never going to go away. But the number of people that come down that driveway or come into administration has really been minimal over the last couple of years, and that's a testament to the men's team, so thank you, you're doing a great job. These questions still happen, but you're handling them internally. Right. So Mike and his team are doing a great job explaining what happens, but it's not our job. If you're not on men's or you're not in the FLC, it's not our job to talk to the people who come to us and explain it. It's our job to redirect them. So it's our job to say, Mike's got a great team, they have a policy, they have a process, they'll explain it. And if someone does come to us, we do want to listen. We definitely do. We want to empathize. But there's always more to the story. So if they've been told no, trust me, there's a reason. And we don't need to get into it with them. That is completely with the men. Does that make sense?
Absolute key to what Robin was talking about with wraparound services and to what we want to do is we're still honoring the person's struggle, still honoring the fact that they're in the tyranny of the moment. We're still honoring the fact that they need shelter. We're trying to help them with the system that we have. So what we do is we refer them to the county, and there are a couple of things that happen in the meantime. So if someone's waiting for the county to call back, we try to assess their basic need right away. Feed them. Clothe them. Socks, deodorant, whatever we can do for that person. There are people, we have a lady who comes in every night just to sit in the hallway because she feels so safe there. Mm-hmm. That's God. Mm-hmm. See, that's experiencing the love of God in a way just because we've set it up. And that's why what happens is the complaints go down because they know, even though we may not be able to have a place for them to sleep that night, that we try to care and we do the best that we can to serve them with dignity and respect.
How since the Bethesda House Shelter welcomes all individuals without restrictions or qualifications, now do they have to be referred from DSS? Or
Yes.
They said they want to be compensated, so
yes.
you don't refer them.
Again, it's not that
Bethesda House isn't a welcoming, loving institution. It's that their primary source of funding comes directly from grants, and then the state has worked out beforehand an amount of money that they pay per bed for they get for the shelter. It's just the way that the system is.
They have to be authorized from DSS to
Right.
stay there.
So what we used to do was, we, meaning my lovely staff who love people so much, but what we used to do is kind of say, okay, since we know that they're going to Bethesda House anyway, we kind of gather our people because we wanted them out of the cold. We'd bring them up to Bethesda House, and then we'd say, okay, DSS will qualify you, and Bethesda House was fine with that. What I do is I go to the county and we discuss these policies and we try to work out the routines and the processes on the Code Blue Committee with the entire community. So the last Code Blue meeting that I was at, the police department were there, Bethesda House was there, the monastery was there, I can't remember, the Booth Home was there. So what we do is we try to set the system up in place so we can cooperate with one another so we can serve the greater community.
Let me just go to the bottom line again real quick. On that memo sheet, third from the bottom, guests must have placement before transitioning them during the winter time. So, they may not be able to stay here, but we have worked with them to find a place where they can go. It may be Albany, they may not want to. But there's a difference between you don't have any place to stay tonight and we are doing our best and have found a place for you to stay.
So sometimes people will refuse.
Yes.
And sit outside.
Right, so what we do, I was going to allude to that, is that if somebody refuses shelter and it's the middle of winter and they're intoxicated or they're vulnerable or they have some sort of cognitive or mental incapacity, we will call the police department on a non-emergency line and alert them that we have a person out in the street who is not taking care to shelter themselves. Because we're committed to making sure that people have a warm and safe place to go. And that's kind of what our motto is. And then we go the extra distance. So a lot of times if you hear, like Robin said, you don't get all the story, many times with the men and women, especially during the Code Blue season, we have gone the distance. Our staff has gone the distance. We have done everything that we've known how to try to help the person stay here. If somebody can't stay here, then they're either beyond our level of care because of an incapacity, or they can't cooperate with some basic behavioral policies. Did you have a question, Daniel?
Yeah, if they're sanctioned from DSS and we can't help them here, what are your other options to find housing?
Social services sanctions do not apply during Code Blue, even when they try to tell you that they
So we're
do.
only concerned really when it's Code Blue because it's pretty much like.
Right, that's the portion that we're discussing. It changes a little bit in the warmer weather. Anybody have any other questions?
So do we provide transportation to the other facilities?
That's
Like say they're here and you found a bed for them in Albany, how do they get there?
most of the time the average way for a person to get to Albany is they get a bus pass. So the cutoff time for that is 10 o'clock according to the county. We've had some conversations about that. Not all of us are comfortable with giving somebody a bus pass in 0-degree weather and telling them to go to Albany. It's not the best. But the other thing about the mission is that we are part of the conversation on working out solutions to that on the county level. So because we do this and we have such an important role in the community, the powers that be let us come to the table and help craft solutions to that. And we are working on that as we speak. It's just something that I can't go into right now. Does anybody have any other questions for me?
Mike, are you able to speak to any pressure or influence from the county in terms of them wanting us to change our protocols?
No, the only thing I can say is...
He says no real good.
No, the only thing I can say in reference to that is that we actually that the county really likes what we're doing, that we have worked on our partnership with the county quite a bit over the last couple of years, so that I think we're in the beginning process of trying to craft a better solution for a process that sometimes seems it can seem punishing to a person. And it does get at the heartstrings, especially during the wintertime. So we're working on a process that I think eventually you'll see something come out of that will make that kind of middle of the night transition thing a lot more palatable. We do sometimes offer transportation. It's a lot of times if I'm doing a transportation thing, it has more to do with the vulnerable person who shows up at the door. So I'll give you an example, but I got to move on because we're running out of time. One of the major issues we have with Code Blue during the wintertime and the vulnerable population is, I'm just having trouble seeing because of the light, is that we get a lot of hospital releases. And a hospital, sometimes their discharge plan, if you look at the paperwork, and again, you can ask my staff, it says city mission. So a person will come down the driveway, they'll get a cab, or it's called an Uber or a Lyft or whatever those things are. They'll be dropped off with a wristband, sometimes in their hospital slippers. This was their emergency discharge plan. So that sometimes we have to face that. And then sometimes a person coming down our driveway is, a lot of times that people don't understand that a shelter means we don't have capacity. We're not a nursing home. We're not a mental health facility. There's only a certain extent to which we can go to serve or house those individuals. Kevin?
When you say that, are we doing anything with the hospital to try to rectify it?
Yes. Yeah, we were in open conversation with them, and we tried to talk to the social service department.
That could be real serious.
It does, but with them, it has more to do with the nature of the way that their system is. So it's, institutions take time to change, but the more conversation, the more dialogue we have, the more we get there.
Mike, what is the protocol for Code Blue for the females?
Right now, we don't have the space. That's a good question. Usually, we were doing 2. We offered 2 during the winter time. We're sort of understaffed and they're under reconstruction. So basically, I've said to the county, we need to hold that until, I think we need probably a little bit more, a couple of hires over there, and then the space situation needs to change.
Is there a place for them to go?
Yes, yeah, we do have, there is a protocol for that, but it's very limited because the nature of the FLC has a lot more to do with a living arrangement rather than sheltering. Right. It's really not set up to be a shelter. It's much different, obviously, than going up to the men's.
Right. Okay.
So we've been talking a lot about transitional. It's a phrase that we use here all the time. And Travis and I have probably talked about transitional since he's come on almost every day, I think. And one of the things that that we were talking about yesterday, and we wanted to put in the training, and you'll see where this is going to, is transition is a process, right? Yeah. Everybody agree to that?
Yeah.
So when we were looking up transition, it was a noun, but it was also a verb, because transition is something that happens to you. So the way we see people here is, just like all of us, we're all in a process of transition, because that's just what life is about. It's about change, right? You're always transitioning from one thing to the other, whether it's a job, family, your personal life, your health. So a lot of times the transition that is happening with the people we serve has a tendency to be negative. They're in negative transitions. Very rarely, there are sometimes people come to the desk and they say, hey, man, I got a job and I'm doing great. But a lot of times it's not like that. It's,
hey, I got out of jail, hey, I need a bed. A lot of times they'll be like, hey, did you get out of jail? Because I haven't seen you in 6 months. That's not probably the best assumption to make, but that's kind of just the reality of the everyday. So when we were talking about transition, the other thing about transition is a person that lives in, the Bridges concept of being in the tyranny of the moment. A person that lives in transition they always feel like something's happening to them. They don't feel like they have any control over their situation. And I think some of us, or most of us, if we're honest with ourselves, we can reflect back on times when we feel like we didn't have any control. Or maybe you feel like that today. Like, I don't have any control, I got to go to this training, right? But it could be a minor thing. But for many of the residents who come in, and many of the guests that we serve, their situation is, I'm not in control of my life. I'm not in control of where I'm going to sleep tonight. That is that's called trauma. And you're going through a process. So you feel like something's happening to you. And that's the recognition that we're looking for with the wraparound service, to treat the person as an individual. And where do they usually start that process? It's normally it's in that driveway, it's in that shelter, it's in that intake process, they come in for Code Blue. The goal of a lot of the people that come in for Code Blue is to go from the temporary transition to get into the bed. So sometimes we have men that will sleep in the day room for 2 weeks so they can get a bed here. Can you imagine sleeping in that day room for 2 weeks? Most of us can't. Most of us can't. And that's the cold reality of it. And then having to get up, and the expectation is that you got to go to DSS the next day, really. Right? And so that's understanding that a person in transition, for them, transition means, I don't know where I'm sleeping tonight. So what I wanted to do was, I was going to use some sticky notes, but because of time, I'm kind of running short. But what I wanted to measure was, what are your expectations of people who come? So with staff, when you see somebody coming down the driveway, what are your initial reactions? Try to be honest with me. What do you think?
Well, one of the things is, when I first came here, I was already traumatized when I came here. I had lost a loved one, right, that I had been with 18 years. I was lost, I was confused, and I needed help. And one of the things is that by going through the process, I really wanted to do something. It was talking about the 90-day program. I truly needed help. So one of the things is, I need to tell you along the way I was praying a lot. God did answer my prayers. I had got me to my place within 17 days, just following you, go to the SCAP and all that there. But not only that, now that I had my place, I wanted to do something else differently. Because if I had that place by myself, and that idle time, I would have went back out there doing my old behaviors and things. So one of the things that I did ask the city mission that, can I join the program, doing it on the outside? And ever since on that journey, it gave me a lot of hope. And I have grown from the program, with the classes. So if there's anything I offer, or if I can help somebody with, it's because this program taught me about love. What can I do? Who can I help today? Coming down there and remembering them things. So it was a challenge, and I love the journey that God had offered me. And even today, I continue to do these things.
So the thing that we talk about, I think, the most, and this is where I had an exercise, I don't know if we can pull it off because we have chapel today, but is the expectations that we have out of the people who are coming through the door when they're in transition. What we found over and over again when we have staff meetings, when we have open discussions, when we have brainstorms, when we were talking about wraparound services, when we were talking about transitions, is the expectations that we carry with us as compared to what actually takes place. It's that transfer of communication is where the ministry actually is, right? It's where the ministry goes on. It's sharing your faith and your love with somebody, but how do you do that, or how do you respond when that's not received well? Do you think that the person isn't getting anything from it? Do you feel frustrated by that? Do you get discouraged? And what do you do with your expectations when things don't turn out? Because I think that, I saw a clip yesterday. Was it Charlie Brown Christmas or something? I love like the happy ending thing, right? Everybody gets together and things work out. Even Charlie Brown and Lucy stop, fighting, and it's a happy ending. But the reality is that a lot of the outcomes just don't go that way, do they?
Right.
You may see the person who you've seen 10 times and breaks your heart. Or sometimes it can be as significant as the person, because of whatever their issues were, or maybe their addiction got to them, where they're no longer with us. We've experienced that multiple times, right? So what do you guys do with that? That was a question that I was going to ask. Kermit?
I think of recent, an individual who had been here multiple times, so he came in back off on parole, and I was like, oh, here he comes again. And that's, I'm being honest. So we had a conversation. I'm like, what are you going to do different this time? And he was like, well, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And I had my apprehensions, but I went along with it. So he did well for a while, and then he did what he did. And I even had a conversation with him yesterday. Listen, go do what you got to do, because you're not promised to make it back. I said, as part of my story, right, and the things I've done in my past, I took this serious. I didn't want to do what I did before again. And that's really important to me right now. And I said, you don't have to ever do this again. You got to stick to the script.
Walter?
I'll just share my experience. I had the experience in the addiction field, and there was an incident that happened, and I didn't pat myself on the back. It was spontaneous how I reacted. I mean, I was working with Mike. He's a wonderful person to work with. He trained me well. So Mike was coming back from the bathroom, and I never met this individual before. This individual is very irate. The name I'm about to say, you're probably going to nod your heads. Archie walked in the office, and he started to curse Mike out. But Mike said, why you follow me in the office? He was irate, he was threatening us and everything. So I turned around and I said, oh, brother, hold up, take it easy, calm down. How can I help you? Because it's all about you and sometimes me. He said, you're a big, gentle giant, but I'll get at you too. And I'm like, wow, why you want to threaten me? I'm trying to help you, right? So I got him out the office. He's back at the window. And he says, I don't care if you call, the police and that. And I'm like, really? You want us to call the police? I said, again, how can I help you? He said, call the police. That's what you want to do. Call the police. They can help me. I said, is that what you want me to do, Archie? He says, yeah. I says, can I help you? Are you hungry? He says, yeah, give me a sandwich. I calmed him down by offering him, how can I help you? Do you want something to eat? And he still was irate. He says, call the police. Me and Mike down 911. We said, we got Archie such and such here. He wants you to come and get him. So when the police got here, he said, yeah, that's right. Come on, take me. And he went about his business. And then he came back a week, two later, but he wasn't the same person. He was the person that know that the city mission, no matter how much they throw at us in that window, we always are willing to help the person in need. And even though he was an irate, high-profile client that came here, first time meeting him, I still was willing to help him, and I helped him the way he wanted me to. So sometimes you gotta ask them, how can we help you? And they'll tell us, this is what I want. And if we can't do it, we gotta direct them to somewhere else, which was the city police department.
We need more guys who will ask us to call the police.
I never had that done to me before. Nobody said, call the police. I never had that done, you know.
Hold on for a second, Kevin. We've got a little bit of time. Unfortunately, we have chapel coming in, and I didn't expect to run this long. So one of the ideas that I wanted to leave with you, and I think I'm going to give you a little bit of demonstration here, and Travis is going to help me. He's going to volunteer his role-playing skills. It's the main theme, the main conflict that a person in transition is going to pull, and what we're here to do, and what we talked about in the beginning was how to serve, how to listen, how to show our love. How do you do that under pressure? I want to give you an example of kind of what it looks like for us during a conversation of somebody being at the window, and then how do we share our faith in a way. So what I wanted to be able to kind of give you an idea of, that this is still ministry. Saying no in a way that's loving, offering the person service. So what Walter just described was a good example of, it's still ministry. It's still ministry calling the police department. That's as much ministry as it is giving the person a coat. Can you see that? So Travis is going to be the irate person. And he's
No smiling.
He's gonna. Travis is gonna test. Travis is gonna test my boundaries for, I thought you were a Christian.
Wow.
So, hey, buddy, your parole officer called you, or called me, and he said that you didn't pass your drug test.
See, no.
Dude, of course he said you didn't pass your drug test.
Man, that's just bias.
You weren't here last night. You weren't where your work pass said, and unfortunately, we're going to have to ask you to find some different circumstances. We can refer you to social services. We can call on-call for you. And I know that this is inconvenient because it's Friday night, but you can't be here. I'm sorry.
You guys always do this to me. Everybody does this. No place to stay. You guys are just kicking me out because I'm fat. Is that why?
Travis, it's because you violated the protocols, because this is what parole is asking. You've been here for 2.5 months. You already relapsed once. We can't extend you any more grace. You're not doing what we're asking you to do.
Yeah, but I'm a Christian, man. This is a Christian place. Like, me and the higher power, we're tight. Like, you know, I throw up some prayers once in a while. We're good. What the heck? I love it.
Travis, you know what? God has a plan for everyone, but God has expectations too. And for us, I have to watch out for the rest of the community. And this is a sober shelter. It's a dry, clean shelter, which means that if you can't follow our policies, that, you know, as a shepherd, I'm supposed to watch out for the whole flock. So I can't just let you slide and ignore the other people here in the community. It's just not safe.
So what do I do now?
I'm going to call social services, and they're just going to have to send you to maybe Bethesda House or
Don't send me to Albany.
Albany.
What do you mean, don't send you to Albany?
Albany.
Don't send me there.
Don't send you there?
Yeah.
You don't want to go there?
No.
Well, I mean, once you call social services, we don't have any control of where it is that you go.
You know, whatever, man.
I'm sorry, bud. I'm sorry.
Fine.
Okay. So, what we wanted to do was kind of give you a breakdown of kind of where we start, what we use to collect data, what our basis for operation is, you know, what the kind of the way we see service, the way we see ministry, and also the part that you can play. Because you don't necessarily get involved in the day-to-day stuff the same way we do, doesn't mean that you can't be helpful. And the more knowledge I think you have, especially about the protocols, can help in situations that maybe you don't have access to the full story. So a couple of things I just wanted to close on was, did you guys find this information helpful?
Yes. Very.
Absolutely.
And the other thing that I was going to ask is, are there things that you see within our procedures and kind of within our approach? Is there some things that you've noticed that maybe we could do different, or do you have some suggestions about how we can look at things to better serve people? Part of that process was coming up with the trainings. So we just happened to get the first training, so we're hoping to get filled by the ones that are coming up that help us as individuals, because that's really that's what led to these trainings. Was we need to be filled and equipped on a daily basis, because one of the things that I always say here is that you can't fake this. You can't give somebody something you don't have. And you know the demand when somebody has that need. And if you don't have that on the inside, then what it becomes is a job like this can drain you and burn you out really quickly. So it's always recognizing that that we have a God that fills our needs, and then that, like Sister Chris said, that we're looking to do things like this to fill ourselves. So men's just happen to be the first staff presenting here. And in actuality, I'm looking forward to having the trainings and kind of getting the break from the routine.
I would also just say, please pray for us. Pray for the staff. Pray for the staff openings, of which there still are a few, both FLC and men's. Getting the right people, and then praying for the current staff. Please pray for us.
That's what I was going to say. We serve a God who's sovereign, and He's the one who will fill us and strengthen us to do this. So pray for the guys on the front line.
I know we're all busy. Some of us a lot more busy than others, but I think it's important in the where we are to have fellowship with those who are going through the program when possible. Helps with the listening, the learning, showing that you actually care, that you love that person. Just, say you're taking a 15-minute break or something, you see somebody, maybe take that time to talk to them about their day and just maybe their week or just whatever they're going through, and see if there's anything maybe you can speak to help that person.
I agree. James? Yeah, real brief. I just wanted to say that, Kevin was talking about basically the humbleness, and I would never thought in my wildest dreams that I would encounter someone that would be so irate toward me that they would put their forehead on my forehead, threatening me, and I would have the mind to stay humble, quiet, and also think about trying to control the situation where it didn't escalate, and de-escalate. And I would never thought that I could go through something like that without being physical, and that happened to me. And that's all because of the individuals that I follow, take suggestions from. Kermit, Walter, Mike, Tom, Mike, Miguel, the individuals that, I work around, and it's It's awesome.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
yeah.
Okay, we appreciate you coming. I'm gonna have Travis close in prayer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, let's pray, guys. Father, thank you for this training. Thank you for every person here, that we can be on the same mission together moving forward and sharing Christ with our lives and our words. And I just pray you give us wisdom to know how to deal with people when they come, and how to love them well, how to listen to them, how to lead them and lift them up, and all that involves, Lord. So thank you for our time today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.